Hello, Battletech fans. Welcome to the Battletech AMA. Let us know if you cannot hear us or if anything sounds a little bit too quiet. I can turn us up as usual. Here we are. We have the legends, the myths, the people behind making sure that the Battletech rules and content stay the way that they should. I'm going to let John mostly run this because as much as I work in the Battletech end of things, I'm not as familiar with the Battletech checking team, though I will still grab questions from the audience as normal. So with that ado, John, go ahead and take it away.
Hey, thanks, Talon. So for those of you who have been on previous AMAs for Catalyst, you know me as the executive editor for fiction. I pretty much oversee all of the fiction lines for Battletech and Shadowrun. It's good to see everyone here. And yes, people will notice the beard is a lot shorter than previous iterations. So, yep, don't hold it against me. I lost a bet. So welcome everyone to the Fact Checkers panel, which is, as I was saying before we got started, it's a very interesting panel that I think is an unsung and unrecognized faction or part of the Catalyst team, but a very important team. I'm going to let the guys here themselves introduce themselves and their background in Battletech and what they do for us in just a minute. But I want to start by setting a very positive tone here. And basically the fact check team makes my job as an editor and putting out over 1 million words of new fiction every year 10 times easier. They do a very, very valuable job for us that we're going to dive into here in the next 45, 50 minutes or so. So without further ado, I'm going to turn over to the guys here and have them kind of share, like I said, their background in Battletech, when they got involved, and what they see their job is as fact checkers. So whoever wants to take the show, I'll pass the baton.
I'm going to leave it to one of you two, the senior guys.
All right. Okay, well, I'm Eric Salzman. I go by Mendrugo on the boards. I've been playing Battletech since about 1987. Basically ran campaigns and other stuff like that through college. And then when the FanPro started up, took over the license, I signed on as a demo agent, was FanPro Commando number 8. And then I moved overseas, and places like Tajikistan, Uzbekistan don't really have game stores, so I switched over to the playtesting group. And I was basically trying to put together in absentia a online campaign where I was trying to, I'd gotten into database programming and decided, okay, I'm going to put together a database of everything, model the entire inner sphere. And, my programming skills weren't quite up to, I got a nice network going, but the gameplay sucked. But I had all this data. And so then they invited me to join the fact check group. And I'm like, I've got a database of like all the facts. So, and I've just continued getting my data, keeping it up to date. And what I really like to do is when we get the new fiction, the other stuff, Battletech has a certain unique aesthetic that really holds together as a unified universe. And so the key thing about fact checking is not telling somebody your story sucks, because we don't do that, but we say, hey, you've used these elements here that contradict stuff that previous people have done, or you use these elements here that don't match the timeline, etc. And because there's just so much data out there that it really helps to have a database like this to cross-check against and make sure that everything fits together.
Excellent. Yeah, and let me just jump in real quick. That's true. As an IP, an intellectual property that is more than 30 years old now and has reams and reams and reams and reams of source books and over 100 novels and short stories galore, keeping everything, and I've lost the term now, I had it just a minute ago, not concurrent, but making sure, like Eric said, make sure everything gels properly is vital for this thing to keep moving forward. So, Luke, why don't we move on to you, and then we'll have Etienne come in at the end.
Sure. So my name is Luke Robertson. I'm Jellicoe Online. Basically, I got into this, would have been about the mid-90s. Eventually got online, started writing stupidly long treaties about spaceships and stuff like that. And yeah, someone on the powers that be decided I must know something about it. And yeah, and so they dragged me into working on Strat Ops. And after that, basically I had some, like I said, some idea what's going on. To write something like Strat Ops, you got to have details about how the rest of the universe comes together. So I've been dragged into a bunch of other projects since then, from writing fluff to fact-checking, basically.
Right, exactly. Continuity. Thank you, Richard. You think I was an editor or something who knew words?
You think you remember that, John?
I know, right? Continuity was a word I was grasping fruitlessly for. So the fans come through. Yeah, continuity is a big thing. Absolutely. So thank you, Luke. Absolutely. So Etienne.
Hello, everyone. My name is Etienne. You probably know me best as Greek Fire. I'm the guy who's always yelling at people to, ping us or message us on the forums if you find any mole mistakes. So I'm one of the newest. I think I still am officially the newest fact checker on the team for at least this point in time. I was brought on board last year, and since then I've been doing fact check stuff, record sheet stuff, mole stuff, a little bit of writing. So a little bit of a generalist, I guess, doing stuff here and there, but been a lot of fun so far, and I'm looking forward to fielding all these questions today.
Awesome. All right. Thanks very much, guys. So, and one thing I want to also make clear, much like editorial, and I think you guys chime in whether you have a different view of this, but I don't think you do. All you guys have it sounds like a long-running love of the IP of BattleTech in general, and your jobs, like Eric said pretty bluntly, it's not to say that the story sucks, because that's not your job. Mm-hmm. Your story is to make sure your job is to make sure that the tech and everything and the characters fit into the existing continuity of the world, so it fits seamlessly and does not take people out of the world, out of the universe. Basically, you're working in conjunction with the author, not at odds with them. Would you say that's true?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's very important to have a good working relationship with the author and to always give feedback respectfully. Otherwise, the author will be predisposed to not enjoy what you have to say. And sometimes it is important to be blunt about where certain things really don't work and to explain why they don't work. But we are working as part of a larger team. We're just a cog in that bigger wheel. So that's basically it.
Okay.
Yeah, we've all heard about stories that got derailed, good stories that had good characters, good plotting, but they got derailed because of continuity issues. And so our job is to try to help sort those out so that the good story can go forward. We point out, like, okay, so you've got the action set with the mech that didn't debut until 3050 on a planet that died in 2750. A character that will be born until 3150. So, we help sort those things out and get it fixed moving forward.
Right. Luke, anything to add on that?
I was just going to say that it's the authors that pay the bills in a lot of ways. I mean, this isn't spreadsheet tech. Yeah, it's all about the stories. So, we help them make it good, but at the end of the day, it's all about them.
Although sometimes I'm not sure this isn't spreadsheet tech, but that's another panel at another time. Exactly. Talon, I don't know if we want to jump into questions.
Yeah,
I think
I've got a couple so far.
Yeah, I think we've given a pretty good idea of kind of the broad view of the fact check team. Now we can kind of zoom in on what questions people have for us. And I'm gratified to see there are questions about how this works. So yeah, if you want to start us off.
Yeah, so the first question I saw kind of pop up on the very top of the list was, how do you handle the tension of being really excited about a product you're fact checking, but knowing you have to wait for the rest of the world to see it before you can talk about it? That's a pretty good one.
That is a really good question, though. It's an excellent question.
Go for it.
One answer is that sometimes the fact-checking deadlines are fairly tight before publication, so you don't have to wait that long.
Guilty. I will be guilty as charged on some of those myself. I'm not going to lie. Yeah. But let's take a longer project, something that a source book that is not going to come out for 3 or even 6 months later. Do you just kind of tamp it down? It's like, wow, the fans are going to go crazy over this, and I get a sneak peek, or it's just kind of part of the job?
Yeah. Sometimes I just enjoy hyping up the product amongst the fan base so that they can be excited about it, even if I can't tell them about it. It helps kind of distribute that excitement elsewhere, share the burden a little bit. But I do also have some NDA people that work on projects I can also talk to, which certainly does help. But it does make it quite hard to post on the forums because, of course, sometimes I don't want to make any mistakes, you know? I know what's coming up, but that might influence how I see other plot points developing. So can I really theorize in this thread here when I have so much insider information? Well, no, I don't really feel comfortable in doing that, which ends up with me just not posting on the forums anymore.
That is a very good point. For those who are wondering what Etienne was asking or referring to, we require people who work with us to sign what's called a non-disclosure agreement, which means they're very limited in terms of what they can say in public about forthcoming projects, or even sometimes after projects come out. If there was issues behind the scenes, it's not, you know, they have to keep a professional face is what I'm going to say, basically. And a lot of these guys also work in other faction aspects for us, writing, source books, things like that too. So it's not just fact-checking team. So it's across a broad base of information. So Eric or Luke, any other comments on that one about the maintaining your excitement or tamping it down?
Yeah. No, one comment about posting on the forums. Back when I was just a demo agent and hadn't signed any NDA whatsoever, but I'd still gotten deep into the research for that game that I was trying to put together, the Succession Wars campaign. There was discussion about, you know, what this, you know, Mystery 5 worlds were and the secret of, you know, the Hidden 5. And I posted, oh, yeah, they probably just chose that world because someone noticed that they accidentally invented a new world that wasn't on the map in the MechWarrior Companion, and decided just, you know, to roll with it and lean into that. And suddenly my post got deleted and I got a notification I'd violated the NDA because apparently they thought I'd been in the room.
Oh, whoops.
On board to shut me up.
And yeah, it does happen. It does happen. Hopefully they were polite about it. I'm sure it was absolutely unintentional. Obviously, you didn't mean to do that. But yeah, sometimes it just gets the better of you. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, Town, what's next?
All right, next one I saw was if two sources have a conflict and they're old enough that it's not really practical to issue errata, how do you decide which one is right? Is it a case-by-case issue, or are there other underlying things that would make one more viable over the other? Especially when you're going back to fact-check some really old Battletech, probably.
Well, I'm going to start from my position because I don't want to be pulling rank on the guys here, but I am going to pull rank in that, of course, there are certain things where Ray and I and other people have, you know, veto power over what the guys present as, you know, this is what came before. And on a case like that, where there are two, and we just had a minor one just pop up that I had to make a call on, it is a case-by-case basis because it depends on the scope of the disagreement. If it's, well, this character was big and bulky, but then another person wrote them as, or no, I'm sorry, started out as a runner's build, but now they wrote them as big and bulky, like, crap. And unfortunately, the last story was just published that way, like, well, we're going to move forward this way, and we're just going to maybe ignore that part and maybe retcon it when I release the book. That's a minor one. If it's something major, like a planet that was invaded 100 years ago and changed here, and someone wanted to use it as X, that one is a bigger point where we all have to have a discussion and figure out exactly, can we retcon it if we have to, knowing we don't really like to do that, because then it can cause, I think at the end said, further snarls in the future history, as I call it, 1,000 years of future history, but that can cause further snarls in trying to untangle these things, can sometimes make it worse. So it really depends on what the issue is and what the far-reaching consequences, possible consequences might be. And if you guys have thoughts on that, I'd love to hear them as well.
Often I would say it is something the author on their own decides. When they look at the older sources and do their own research, a lot of authors, from what I've seen, try to reconcile conflicts in terms of canon, which is usually the cleanest solution if it's doable, which of course it isn't always. And when it reaches fact-checking, usually, at least in my experience, I don't confer with the authors beforehand. So then I can go at them and say, hey, well, you know, there's this thing you might have missed. And it's possible that the author already knew that and decided that that secondary piece of canon just wasn't important. And that's good because we kind of act as a double check there to make sure that what they're writing is solid. But something to remember with the Battletech Universe is that nearly every source book, with a very small number of exceptions, is written from an in-universe perspective. So if we have to, we can just throw out a certain passage. It's not the end of the world. It's just the way we have to roll sometimes, or choose to roll sometimes if it leads to a better story.
Yes, which sometimes that can lead to some friction on the fiction side, which I don't say it's necessarily canon, but we are trying to present things from a certain point of view as the, I'm going to put it in quotes, the quote unquote truth of this is what went down. And the story you guys are just looking at is actually the real story behind these events that were put in publicly, which I'm looking forward to seeing. Hopefully there are not many comments on it because it's written by a guy who knows this stuff, but I'll be curious to see what you guys have to say about it. Eric, Luke, any other comments on that particular aspect of the process?
That's why it's good to have a large and robust and talented fact-checking team, because when we come up with stuff, we'll say, oh, this thing is wrong because you're the source that says this, and then other people will be able to cite other sources that shows past conflicts, and then we can sort of hash it out and come up with enough hand-wavium to maneuver around it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I see Ray is lurking in the chat, so he is here, so to speak. So that's good. We have him at least on board. So hi, Ray.
Hey, boss man.
I assume he's listening or watching or something here. So, Luke, anything else to add on that one? Otherwise, we'll move to the next question.
Not really. I mean, like I say, we don't try not to throw anything out. We try and make use of it. It's there, and usually we can.
Yeah. Okay. Well stated. All right, Talon.
So this will be a fun one. Is one I've always questioned myself sometimes is, how is it that even though the Atlas fluff says it is not the tallest mech in BattleTech, that it gets through in the fiction that it is? I've always wondered how long myself as well.
Yeah, I was wondering how long it takes for one of those specific questions. Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. Me as an editor, I don't know. I always thought the assault mechs were pretty much of a similar height. The Battle Masters, the Atlas, the Awesome. So, fact checking team, explain this for us.
Clearly, a wizard did
it. There's your answer.
Oh, you got the death's head skull. You got the psychological impression. Kerensky's really beamed into the human fear. Lizard brain with that skull thing. So it just appears taller. It's just like in.
There you go.
Proliferation cycle thing. You have the hardened Lyran commando sneaking into Hesperus 2, the manufacturing facility and seeing a Mackie for the first time, and he wets himself basically. Oh my God! Even though work mechs have been of similar sizes have been stomping around for the past 2 centuries, suddenly he's freaked out by this thing. So it's a psychological bit.
Yeah, that's exactly the take I was gonna do. It's like the guy who's got a super good aura, he's like a real tough leader and all that, and you're like, well, yeah, when you're describing him to your friends, you're like, yeah, this guy, he's like 6'2", really built, and then you see him in real life afterwards, and he's like 5'6", and they're like, oh wait, yeah, no, totally off there.
It's Victor Steiner-Dagan.
Yeah, exactly.
There you go. All right, there's your answer, PsyOps. I love it. This is why we have the fact check team. It's very simple. Okay, next.
All right, we've got. Not quite sure if this was a Ray question or an us question, but the BT universe in Canon Forward, is it safe to say that where a mech, tank, and aerospace fighter is made, it also produce all of that platform's components, weapons, and ammunition?
Nope.
I don't think that's ever been the case, and it's certainly not going to be going forward. But again, I'll let the team actually handle this one because I think they're much more ground level view on this.
Yeah, no. Part of the whole reason infrastructure fell apart as much as it did during the Succession Wars was because of the basic assumption that parts are made throughout an entire nation or even in other nations. And when you look at the component lists for mechs, and Luke, of course, you probably have a lot to do here as well. There's a lot of products that are produced in other nations. And yeah, I just saw Johannes say that's a Luke question. And yeah, it totally is a Luke question. So I'm just going to shut up and let you keep on going, Luke.
Oh, thank you. No, look, I blame this on Sana a bit. When you go online and you have a look at their factory lists, basically if it's on a mech, it's there in that factory. And so people just assume it's all coming from that one factory, but that's never been the case. You can go back and look at objective rates, for example, and you can see bits and pieces being drawn in from everywhere. So, I mean, like I said, Sana just assumes if it's been made, like a mech's being made there, all the parts are being made there, and that mech is made for eternity. And from a fact checker point of view, you just can't assume that. It could have been nuked 300 years ago, and, you know, we have to live with that.
Well, it's interesting because I use Sarna quite a bit myself when I'm doing my final pass, backing up everyone else. And when they list the factories where the AC-10 is made. They list the factories who makes PPCs, which I think is amazing. That awesome. We've gone down to that granular level of detail. And it just made me realize, my God, there has to be like billions of C-bills in just transporting these parts from one planet to another. The infrastructure to get them where they need to be installed has to be massive. And again, we're not going to talk about that because the economics of this IP are something that I don't want to touch with a 20-foot pole. So 20-meter pole. But it's just interesting, that idea that people make that assumption. But no, integrated manufacturing, vertically integrated manufacturing like that would be, I think, nearly impossible in the universe itself. It'd just be way too difficult because you don't want to put all those eggs in one basket, first of all, because if it's destroyed, you're screwed now. You're out of business, basically. So decentralized to me would make more sense in terms of fictional IP. Eric, anything to add on that one?
If I can make a small aside super quick.
Yeah.
Just since Sarna was brought up, I do want to say that Sarna is still a fantastic source for everyone in the community, fact-checking team included.
Yes.
I use Sarna quite a bit as a way to determine where to look for certain information. I would not say that or at least in my case, I don't use Sarna as a primary source. But it is a good repository for information. And I do also want to shout out Frabby, who couldn't be here today, who's a big Sarna guy. Unfortunately, he found out that he has friends and families who were impacted by the flood. So I really hope everything goes well for you there, bud.
Yeah. Shout out to Frabby. Yeah, absolutely. But that is a good point. Yes. I actually I probably use Sarna more myself because I don't have the 3-foot wall of source books you guys probably go to look up. I have a lot of PDFs, but I find it as an aggregator of information, at least to give me usually the answers. And sometimes I find things that, this needs to be put in. And that's not anything on the fact check team from a story perspective, like, we need to have this in there. So it's been extremely useful for me. So Eric, I think you're going to say something?
Yeah, I mean, you look at things like Bithynian ballistics. They just make 4 different flavors of autocannons. So basically, they've obviously got to be shipping them somewhere else for use in other places. But in terms of references, yes, Sarna is a great reference, and the great people who add to it are fantastic. But again, it's better for double checking on things. We don't just go to Sarna and look it up there and consider it done. We all look at original things. And I've got to say that it used to be a real pain to basically look through all of the source books and the other stuff like that. Even the search algorithms for PDFs were terrible. It would take, half an hour for my search to come back. But now that they've got the really fast search integration into the Windows system, I type a keyword and I get, the 20, sources that this thing is in pop up, and I can immediately go through and find them. It's only a real problem when you get a really common word and suddenly you get 100 sources that you're looking for.
There's nothing worse than having a mech that has the same name as a planet, that has the same name as like a person. So you do a word search and you've got 500 different books and you're like, all right, what am I doing?
Yeah. Yes, that same thing in stories too. Absolutely. All right, next talent.
Okay, we got, this is from Dark Izzy, just because I have to call him out so you know who it's actually from, is what is the craziest idea someone tried to sneak past you? And I dare you to say that it was one of mine. I'm not sneaky, I'm just openly crazy.
Well, I got one. So, the Kickstarter allowed people to put in any character, any idea they wanted. And so I was assigned to bring into Canon and make sure it fit someone who wanted to be a Jedi.
Oh, nice.
And we did it.
Yeah.
Oh, let's just cross the streams there. That's delightful.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, good point there. I would say Kickstarter backer as well. This isn't from a fact checker perspective, but more as an author one. I had one who wanted to be a Clan Wolverine warrior during the clan invasion, who was a military advisor for the Free Worlds League. And so, yeah, I figured I wouldn't try to canonize that one. Didn't think it'd be a good idea.
Right. Heuristics on that one were a good one because I can't even see how that would work. Luke, you got one for us?
Oh, I got nothing obvious. I mean, people are always trying to see something through. I mean, I play with warships, so the people are dragging these things back from the death all the time. Yeah, there's always something. Someone's, like I said, it's nothing obvious. Sorry, can't help you there.
Well, the one thing I'm going to mention, it wasn't a sneak. It was very obvious because they really wanted to do it. A particular author wanted, and you guys probably, I think, may know about this one because in the various iterations of we had kicked around the idea of having a mech fight on the outside of a battleship.
Yeah.
And although the idea sounded cool, the more I thought about it after some logical, I'd say, points brought up about the infeasibility of it, that we had to make it change to elementals, which made much more sense. It was one of those ideas that even I just couldn't, and especially after a certain movie came out where people were galloping on horses across a freaking Star Destroyer. I'm just going to let that go. I'm like, yeah, no, we're going to let the guys who are meant to do this kind of stuff go do it. And the scene turned out, I think, really great. And the author understood why this had to happen this way. It just didn't fly in terms of, this is science fiction. It's 1,000 years in the future. We're walking big stompy robots that could never feasibly exist in real life. But there has to be a line drawn in terms of reality. I put that in very, very loose quotes. Just like the early books where they had them doing handstands and flips and somersaults and all sorts of crazy stuff. It's like you got to make sure that these things have a baseline of what they can do and what they can't do, basically. And that one was like, well, that's not going to fly. So,
although I will point out from a fact checker perspective, in the Blood of Kerensky scene where they have the Tiramira board crashing into the ship and killing the Ilkhan, the clans did send people out on the hull with magnetized feet to add to their firepower against the aircraft.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. See, yeah. Okay, that's fair. That's fair. Exactly. But I think a run and gun mech battle just would have been like
authors
crazy.
Can't know everything. So we specialize in different rule sets. Like I'll do aerotech, other people will do battle armor and things like that. And for example, that running on the hull, your range is 0. You can't actually fire other things for most part. So from a game point of view, it's impractical, but it looks damn cool.
Exactly. And if I had been a more flexible editor, I would have said, we'll go for the rule of cool thing. But I'm like, even I have my limits. So there we go. And that was one of them. But I like the elemental scene. I thought it was really well done. I was really happy with it in the final product. And I think it really did what it needed to do, too. So. All right, sir.
So luckily, it was brought up there at the very end about some specialties there. So it's exactly what the next question is about. Do you carve out niches or specialties on the team focusing on specific subjects, or are folks expected to generalize?
Is there any generalists here? I would be surprised just because of the breadth of the IP, but
I would consider myself a bit of a generalist. I'm not really a specialist. Maybe in like mech lineage, I think I'd probably be able to rattle off all the Warhammers one by one, or all the Marauders one by one, and explain how they're related. But beyond that, I know the Free Worlds really well. I know the hipster clans really well, like all the homeworld ones that you never hear about. I know Protomechs really well, which is basically the same thing, stuff that never comes up. Yeah, there you have it. Otherwise, I'm pretty much a generalist.
Okay, I love hipster clans, by the way. So I want to ask Luke, who mentioned that he specializes in aerospace. And my question is, was that a conscious decision, or did you just kind of fall into it because you saw a gap that was really being either exploited for gain or not even being touched very much?
Okay, so I'm interested in naval stuff to start with, outside of BattleTech. So, of course, that drew me into it. And so that when I was just a normal person on the boards, etc., So I would write about that sort of stuff and research that sort of stuff and have some idea of how to use it. Playing it's a bit difficult because no one plays it, but we're working on that. So, of course, when I got into fact-checking and writing and sourcebook work with Battletech, it became an area people would come to me to ask for information about or provide stats for something. It's a little bit off topic, but when I started doing TRO work, so I would get people, I would be doing aerospace stuff like the fighters or the warships, and they came up. I got into battle armor because, of course, no one's using the stuff. Well, that's not true, but it's more that people would be requiring stats for them, but most designers would be targeting mechs. So there's a gap, and I went in there and filled it. Actually, for me lately with Rec Guide, it's been fairly quiet. But on the other hand, because I'm a clanner, I've been picking up lots of clan work to play with. So you find areas, part of it's what you're good at, and it expands out from there.
Okay, yep, very good. Eric, anything to add?
Basically, because of putting that database together, I got to be pretty good at the settings and where everything's located and the histories of the individual planets and what they're like. And then I was also doing a series of fiction reviews, sort of deep dives, essentially fact-checking the fiction as it came, chronologically from Age of War up to, I think I've managed to get up to shortly before the Fourth Succession War. And so I've gotten to be pretty good at at least the early pre-Fourth Succession War history of stuff. This is in the fiction review board on the website. It's the chronological fiction review threads.
Yeah, if y'all haven't seen it, it's pretty freaking great. So highly recommend it.
You and I should probably talk at some point, although I think I'm dreading that conversation, but we should probably talk about it anyways. Because bringing things into line as much as feasibly possible is a big part of my job, especially with the backlist. But that's for another time. Again, well, much of this is for another time. All right. Next town.
All right. So most license holders had their own, unfortunately, I cannot pronounce this, periodicals, Battletechnology, MechForce, etc. At the time they were considered canon. When did they stop being canon? Don't know if we can answer this one, but figured it was good enough to throw a crack in.
Well, I don't know if any of you guys have any information on this one.
Pretty sure that was under Herb, right?
Well, Battletechnology goes way, way, way back.
But
fast days.
But that there was an official ruling passed on it. I'm not sure that there was one before Herb, was there?
I don't know. First of all, this is more of a Randall or a Lauren question, the old guard. To the best of my knowledge, and I'm not going to speak to Herb saying one thing or another, because as I understood it, back in the day, Battletechnology wasn't always canon because it was a completely side independent project that somehow the creator got permission to do it back when it was the wild, wild west of the IP, and anyone would come along with a buck and an idea and say, hey, let's do this. And Jordan or Mort or whoever would say, yeah, go ahead and whatever. And I'd love to get my hands on. I have some of those. I have like a handful of those issues. I'd love to get my hands on other ones. So the short answer is I don't know, and I'm not sure we're ever going to go back and revisit them because because it's done by a third party, that gets really, really complicated.
Yeah.
We actually made an effort to track down whoever might own the Battletechnology because we were investigating, do we want to bring this in, just even to have the data in our kind of under our umbrella, and we couldn't find them. If anyone knows of who might have a contact who has access or who owns the Battletechnology IP, let us know because we kind of like to get in touch with them. But at this point, it's not, and I don't think it's going to be. At least that's what I know. Again, Randall or Lauren can probably speak to this more authoritatively. I don't know if Ray can either. Okay, cat. My cat just tore through here like a bat out of hell. So I'm not sure. Whatever Herb said, even I'm not entirely sure that's going forward the way it's going to be. So that's my position, which I realize is a very unsure answer to that. But that's what I can tell you.
Yeah, it happens. Not every question can be answered by the group here, and I figured that maybe it was something that we could take a crack at.
will
there we go.
say-
Ray, hold on. Ray just said battle technology equals not canon.
Yeah, but I will say as an aside that the rec guides have been actively canonizing a lot of old designs from the old magazines. And
Awesome.
another example of this was, or it was indirectly featured in Hanseatic Crusade when Jeff Swift canonized the Rhino in a bit of a different way, but it's the same thing. So a lot of I think there's an intention to bring back a lot of the designs, maybe not all of them, but a lot of them.
Right.
And you know, some of the articles back then, you know, none of them were fact checked. The FOSSA was great continuity, so a lot of them, you know, they no longer fit into the modern setting of BattleTech. I mean, for example, they licensed to they licensed the Earth comics. There was one of their first color ones. Apparently, they mistook they thought they had licensed Flash Gordon, looking at the fashions, and they Helen Minister of Economics who walks in with blue skin.
Oh wow!
So yeah, certain things not coming forward, but.
Oh my God! There's an old Dragon Mag, the dropship from Aliens. Okay. Well, that's interesting to know, Eddie, and I didn't know you guys. Oh, I figured the recognition guides were going to be kind of like the official whole Megillah. Pretty much every mech that was worth putting in there was going to go in there, especially judging by the fact there's what 17 issues of that one, and it's still going, if I'm not mistaken.
Still going.
Yeah, so I think that could be considered fairly definitive, and the fact you guys went back and dug out those old ones, like, yeah, let's smoosh this off and make it work kind of for the modern era is terrific. So kudos for everyone. I know that it had to be a Herculean task to get that all in shape and working and everything, and I think Ray did a really great job of overseeing that, and you had your work cut out for you. Let's put it that way.
So moving on then. So how does one start working or volunteering as a fact checker in BattleTech?
I think most of us here were approached. I was approached by someone who was already working for CGL. Luke, I believe you said the same thing earlier on.
Yeah.
Eric, I don't know about you.
Yeah, well, basically, I'd been a Fan Pro Commando, and then I went inactive, but they still kept me on their mailing list. And so they switched me over to playtesting, and then when they were putting together a fact-checking group, they sent an email out to the entire mailing list, said, hey, you want to be a fact-checker? And so I said, yep. So they brought me on board. That was sort of irregular, and then they regularized it a couple of years ago and sent the invitation again, and I said, yeah. So.
Pretty much got to do something stupid so people notice you at the end of the day.
Basically show that you're willing to put in a bunch of unpaid hours for BattleTech with little to no reward in return. And yeah, someone might approach you one day.
The glory can be yours. Exactly.
All right. Outside of official published books and PDFs, what can be considered canon? Might be too big of a or broad of a question to be answered here, but
Well, they've kind of answered it themselves.
yeah.
Yes.
But yeah, I'm going to speak to Sarna real quick, but you'll notice Sarna has the footnote all their references. And sometimes they're not 100%, but Sarna's still great, but they footnote them, and I'm glad they do that because they're taking them from official sources. But that they pretty much answered their own question. There is nothing else. Everything that we put out is the canon. There it is. There's the fan fiction is not canon. Nothing else is. It's got to come out by us to be considered the real deal.
This would have been an excellent Frabby question had he been here, because he's the one who's a real stickler about this. I will say that one thing that's a little bit more complicated is when Randall was lead dev, he did say that the stories he was putting up for MechWarrior Online were canon, and I'm not sure that's been officially rescinded yet. So those thus so far kind of exist in a nebulous kind of in-between zone.
Well, until we published them earlier this year as The Mercenary Life. So
were they all published there?
Yep.
Well, no, but this for MechWarrior Online, so this would be the lore things like the Sun Cobra, like
Oh, is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, there are canon like hero passages that do refer to mechs, like you just said, which puts them in a
Oh, Randall, why are you killing me like this? Although I guess, well, no, because there's a lot of things that even sort of recognize that they mark when things come from a video game, when those guys decide to go off the ranch and make their own stuff. Like, no, this is apocryphal, or there was, I think, something from the card game, or any computer game is still not entirely. If they do their own thing, it's not canon for the tabletop game, as I understand it. So that'd be again another Randall question to which is which. That's I guess that in what you just said, that does fall into kind of a nebulous gray area. Ugh. Randall. Anyways.
An official ruling just came out, not canon. So there we go. We don't have to worry about it anymore.
Oh, good.
Fantastic.
The overseer.
This is why we keep Ray here. Yeah.
So the next one is, what were the worst errors that you guys didn't notice and got published?
I will start this one off because it was a pretty big one. When Hour of the Wolf came out in January, we were literally down to the wire in getting that published. And then about 24 hours after it hit on January 1st, someone said, I think it was Phil, might have mentioned, like, hey, there are supposed to be a couple more interludes that aren't even in the printed book. And I went back, and somehow between the Word document and putting it into Vellum, which is what we use for ebooks, it didn't grab them. It literally, and I was rushing so fast to get the 170,000 word book published that it went out early without like two kind of important interludes not in the first version. So thankfully, we didn't print 5,000 copies of the print book without that in there, and was able to go in and make the change and get it out within, like, I think 48 hours. But that was my biggest one, to not have parts of a book that were supposed to be in there. And I still blame the program. It wasn't user error, it was program error. And I'm still annoyed about it that it just completely missed that. So that was, of late, that was my biggest error that got through temporarily.
Let's see. Starter book Fist and Falcon, when that was initially pushed out as a PDF, that version that first went up initially had all of my comments in the margins.
Well, I hope you were nice. That's all I want to say, Eric. I hope you were nice.
I don't know what the author was thinking here. What was they writing? This doesn't make sense.
Luke or Eddie, you guys, anything come to mind?
Oh, basically anything I've written that's gone out with spelling mistakes. No. Yeah, that's mostly it. But anything where you've made a change and you're certain that this thing is wrong and it doesn't make it through to the final product. Had a few of those go through, and you're hoping someone's reading your fact check reports, but sometimes you just don't know.
Yep.
Yeah. I'll say from my end, fact checking something and then having it be replaced with something that still isn't okay, which I'm trying to be a little bit more specific now to recommend replacements or alternates to make sure that doesn't happen. For personal defeat that I was ashamed of, in one of the recent rec guides, there was a Marion passage that referenced lances and the like. And afterwards, when it came out that, that was wrong, I was ashamed of myself. I know this. I have Marion mechs painted up on my shelf at home. I was disgraced.
Well, it happens to everyone. This is a thankless job across the board in a lot of ways, and sometimes things will get through no fault of our own.
I'm just going to say one thing there is not all of us are American too. So
yep.
Language is different from different places. Spelling is different.
Yes.
I've been caught there. Had a long chat with Herb about that one.
I would imagine so. Yeah.
So the next question on the line is, tell us how you know where and what to look at when fact-checking a story. Do you pull from your brain, or you just know what kind of era of books to go look into? What are your guys' process to go and find that information you're looking for?
That's a really interesting question.
Again, PDF keyword search immediately, unless it's a super common term, that can immediately select which of my OCR'd digital files I can pull from. And then some of the older FOSSA stuff, I have like everything digitally. Some of it I scanned myself because, moving around, all my stuff's in storage. I just have a digital library. and some of the old stuff isn't OCRable. So, or the OCR was done, but it has all sorts of weird artifacts in it that screw up the search. So I just have to sort of, I read through all of them in great detail, trying to put together that database for the game. And so I have a good sense of the stuff back then of what's where. So that helps me, I think it was in that source book back there, especially like children. I love an OCR version of the Warriors of Kerensky, if that's on your agenda. Because that was a key source book back then that never got a digital version.
Oh, I was going to say we're working on that aspect on several different fronts. Let's put it that way. Thoughts on that, guys? Etienne or Luke?
I mean, I'm not made of time, so I can't fact check absolutely everything in a book, and that's something to consider here. So when you're reading a passage that says Mech X was on planet Y doing event Z with person, I'm running out of letters. I can't check absolutely everything nonstop, especially if it's a 300-page source book. I'm going to go absolutely insane. My wife's going to kill me. So generally I read through it and see what doesn't feel right. And when certain things really do need to get double checked, then I'll double check them, because I do know what certain more problematic things might be for certain authors. But usually I just go with my gut for a lot of things. And then, I go with my massive OCR collection.
so yours is more of like you've read so much material that eventually you kind of get that gut check of you've just been in it so long that you know when something doesn't feel right.
Oh yeah, absolutely,
definitely. I mean, you have holes there too. Like, I'm not a big novel reader. I read a couple back in the 90s, and that's about it. So I've got huge holes in things I'm fact checking, where I just have to step back and hope, Eric or Teen or someone finds them for me. But it's just got to go with your gut for a lot of it, because there's just so much of it out there.
I will say that depending on the deadline and depending on the current fiction focus, I will read up on products I might not have read in a while, just to kind of refresh myself. So if there's a Golden Century product coming out, then I'll whip out Crusader clans and Warden clans and go through those again, just to brush up on the histories of those older clans that we don't see a lot of. And that does help, but when the deadline's within 48 hours or something, then screw it, man. I can't do that.
Yeah, I think the instinct for it, because you guys are all subject matter experts on the IP, probably among the most knowledgeable of anybody that are working on it, and you're just going to get a feel for what seems right and what isn't. And of course, the gut's not always correct. Mine isn't, and no one's is all the time. But I think it's a good baseline for, does this appear to be? And then you just kind of focus on, like you said, the ones that are most important, or the ones that seem like, this is a really big deal if this gets through, that kind of stuff. Yeah. And of course, time is everything. Yeah, we're still working on that internally here, is giving people more time to do things. And sometimes we're successful and sometimes we're not. So. Next.
Yep, sorry about that. I was answering a question in the chat there. Does fact-checking focus solely on keeping the lore straight, or do you inject CBT rules into the fact-checking as well? Lore versus rules, essentially. And apparently someone's got an ice cream truck going by.
Yeah.
I know.
Takes off. That's a good question. I'm going to leave it for the fact-check team. I'm going to let you guys answer that one first, I think, because I'm not sure the answer.
We do get the rules, so we can fact check them, and I have fact checked them in the past, and sometimes things don't line up with how characters are portrayed. So if they have a wrong personality trait based off of what's portrayed in the fiction itself, then you can bring that up. Or if they aren't piloting the right mech, or gosh, I don't know.
Travel time is a good one.
Yeah, travel times. Thank you. That's a great one. Yeah, take it away, guys.
Yeah, and also we tend to look at also not just the rules, but if a described maneuver violates the basic laws of physics, far more so than Star Trek or Star Wars, BattleTech tries to get at least the basic physics right, not in terms of material science, which is completely insane, but So we have things where someone will describe doing a transit from the jump point to the planet in weightless conditions. You say, no, wait, that's not quite how it works, guys.
Battlestar Galactica, they're always trying to drop ships on the planets and pull them out somehow.
Yeah. And yeah, I've run into the fiction versus rules more than once in my tenure, and I just sometimes have to throw up my hands and go with it. The range of lasers, for example, I'm just not going to touch that today.
Range is finicky. You have contradicting information in the fluff as to why range is limited. So that's one of those weirdo things where I just kind of ignore it nowadays and let the author do whatever they want to do.
Well, so we have to fall within reason. I started doing copy edit on the fiction stuff when BattleCorps existed, and I was told very strictly that I had to adhere whenever possible to the rules. Have we relaxed that some? I think so, but you still can't do, there are certain things we just don't allow because it too blatantly breaks the rules, as Eric stated. And I think we can't go too far against that. Push, but not push through.
And it's changed over time. I mean, if you look at the really, really old fiction, you have, Tor Renfred Tor, the captain of the Invidious, boasting about how his Invader-class jump ship can swat a dropship out of the sky with its lasers from 10,000 kilometers away. What?
Excuse me? Novels are great for that. They're fantastic.
I think you're seeing something here with a lot of the aerospace stuff. The authors are making up on the fly. So the rule, because this is BattleTech, it's all the mix, and that's where people are focused. So they watch other sci-fi, they get ideas, and that's where it comes from.
I think authors should just have you on quick dial for when they need an aerospace passage checked over, right?
It wouldn't be a bad idea. And I'll be saying this: I would like to see more space combat in fiction as well, not only just in shrapnel, but also as a part of operations in novels too. I don't think we get enough of it. I think it is an underserved portion. I know it's a big stumpy max. I get that, but I think it's an underserved portion of the IP that should be explored further. Now, Ray's head's probably exploding off screen somewhere, but it's true, at least in my opinion. All right, Talon, what's next?
We have what is easier to check? Probably should say fact check. Present stories like Dark Age and soon to be Ill Clan, or prequel stories like Star League, Age of War, or even early space flight.
Current, absolutely, 100%. No
I imagine
debate.
The answer was probably current.
Anyone who answers otherwise is lying. No. But current stuff doesn't have as much fiction muddling everything up. Like Eric just said, you go back to the early novels and stuff gets weird. Stuff gets contradictory. So yeah, the closer you get to the 30-25 setting, the more research you got to do and the more reconciliation you got to do.
Yep. Yeah, it's those heady days when it was a wide open sandbox, and all you had was the box set, and that was it. And got a little crazy back then. So I think it's I wouldn't call it constrained, just more defined nowadays. Yeah. And it's Luke or Eric, anything to add on that one?
Yeah, I've got to say though, I know that some authors have attempted to avoid, to thread the needle by including no setting information whatsoever in their story. So basically, I'm reading through it, and I'm thinking, the characters are fine, the action is fine, but basically, the planet is described as absolutely generic, or they even have, place unknown, date unknown, and I'm just like, no, we're a fact check team. Put it somewhere, and we'll make it work. But because basically, I like when the stories add to the lore and expand the universe rather than just have a generic story set in place unknown.
Right. I mean, that's something that basically the writers should be doing their basic homeworks. I think is vital to grounding a story. Pun half intended.
And, if you want to write stories for shrapnel and stuff like that, do what research you can, put it out there, and we will help make it fit.
Right. It's not like you don't have access to tons of resources. Okay. Luke, anything more on that one?
No, all good here.
Okay. All right.
So
what's up? What's next?
So our responses from AMAs.
No.
I don't know, John. You want to tear yourself down to that one?
I just answered. I just said that. There you go. So,
All right. What is everyone's adult beverage of choice when the fact checking gets rough?
I can't drink anymore for health reasons, so water is about as exciting I can get.
wow. All right, Eric or Luke, you guys got to have a better answer than that, I hope. Although I understand your reasoning, Eddie, and so I don't
You
want.
got me going.
I've got whatever's in here.
Oh, I don't mind a whiskey now and then. It keeps us going.
There you go. I think that covers the whole gamut. So
Yeah.
except for Eric's mystery drink. So yeah.
Fusion hair.
Don't know if the next question. I know that Ray answered a different someone else on something called objective raids, though the other half of this question has to do with the Luthians, so maybe it still applies. I've heard that objective raids and Luthien are generally considered flawed canon and aren't used as primary fact sources. Are there other products in that category that you may know of? I don't expect you to know everything that got probably ripped out of canon.
To be honest, I wasn't even aware those things were considered, non-viable at this point. That's really interesting. So
The author of Luthien basically gave a whole bunch of new names that didn't match anything previous for the Smoke Jaguars, and so yeah, it's the action is fine, but the naming conventions are all over the place.
Oh joy.
On a personal level, I'd say the Dark Age PDFs that can be downloaded on the website, a lot of it still holds up, but there's some weirdness there now that the Dark Age has been fleshed out a little bit more. If you look at the mechs and their histories and their components and whatnot, and some of the characters too, some of them just don't work anymore. So that's a little bit less solid in my eyes.
Any other thoughts on that? I'm going to recuse myself because I don't have the in-depth source book knowledge on this one.
Anything old and obscure, basically. Someone will find some piece of data out of it and use it, and then we've got to resolve it somehow.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I mean, anything that gave hard production numbers, that's been thrown about.
Yeah.
That's been
Yeah.
thrown out.
Yeah.
The Adventure Architects guys who wrote the Free Worlds League book, they gave very detailed, okay, this factory makes this many per year and stuff like that. And so when I was building that database for the game, this is like, candy, yes, more, give more. But, from a writing perspective, that unrealistically constrains the universe. So all that's been thrown by the wayside.
Right. Yeah, that's a very good point. Some of these things have to be overlooked, shall we say, or dismissed because they make the universe not work properly. That's a very good point. Yep.
All right. Next question is, do you have a particular source that is a sentimental favorite to draw on, even if it's not the most useful, or one that you hate having to refer to?
I have to commend the fan base. These are some really interesting questions you guys are throwing out. So kudos to you. I did not expect this kind of breadth, which is great, which is just fantastic. I got nothing here. So
I feel like it's more of a kind of an author question than a fact-checking one. Fact-checking one, I just draw on any source that exists, But from an author side of things, I've been rereading the Dark Age novels recently, and one book that has a few interesting snippets in it is Hunters of the Deep, and I'd love to drag those snippets out and canonize them in a certain way. There's actually a clan custom that's only ever detailed in that book, and yet is said to have existed for quite a long while. And we've never had any details on it anywhere else, so that's something I'd love to shove in somewhere.
I love Explorer Corps, especially its detailing of the deep periphery stuff. And unfortunately, one of the factionettes that it introduced there in the Khwarazm Empire, I'm actually about 2-hour drive from Khorzem, right here where I am right now. I'm also not far from Samarkand, so I can declare again, broadcasting live from New Samarkand, old Samarkand. So it would be great to try to do something with that group. Unfortunately, when Interstellar Expedition Sourcebook came out, the detail of that region, the Khorzem Empire was completely forgotten.
Yeah.
Left off the page, and when we asked, "Hey, what happened to that?" The offhand response, hopefully non-canon, is, "They all died." I would hope at some point we could probably try to bring back the Khorzem Empire and show what they were post-clan.
Oh, yeah, and to be clear here, in terms of fact-checking, I don't refer to any sort of ask the authors questions. And I mean, they can be good to resolve certain things, but when the answer is everyone died, I think usually we can do a little bit better than that.
Next question is, has anyone tried to do a complete index? I remember one similar made for the Greyhawk D&D setting, but I imagine that the answer to that is anyone who had tried to attempt, and someone asked the same question of like all the universes and galaxies and planets all put into a timeline. It's like the person who probably attempt that would probably just drive themselves to madness, I'm assuming would be the answer.
Well, I think Eric's database is probably the closest thing. Assuming
I think a lot of us have tried it.
He tried. It's better to succeed is the question, of course.
Well,
yeah.
If you go to the fiction review board, to the fiction discussion board on the Classic BattleTech site, dating myself, just the regular BattleTech site, there's pinned at the top is a master index, and that basically shows every scene in every work that's come out, including the battle technologies, including everything that's even tangentially related to the IP, with projected date and location, faction that controlled it, and it's all in order. And basically everything that I've done a review for is hyperlinked from that. So basically that master list, I keep updating it as new fiction comes out. So if you want a timeline of all the fiction scenes, that's right there pinned at the top of that board.
Okay, that's probably the closest thing as we're going to get, which still seems pretty damn impressive.
To go and put them all together.
Yeah, exactly. I have to check that out myself, actually.
Yeah, this sounds really cool, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So how does the fact-checking team balance old lore that says things like 12 jump ships produced a year versus the realistic needs of the universe?
Oh, that's easy. We just ignore it.
I'm started it.
Yeah, pretty much. Just because you can't be constrained by that stuff that came out 20, 30, 25 years ago. It's why, I don't know, not entirely why, but I like to think it's why books like the Battle of Tekea got redone. Not just to update it because it was a really cool idea, but to kind of bring it into, even though it was a seminal battle that happened, now in game terms, a century ago, just to bring a new kind of gloss to it and reintroduce people to that particular campaign. And I think a lot of things were, I want to say, filed off. I'm not sure that gets into the fact check weeds that I'm not entirely sure about, whether there were errata incorporated into the new version of it, for example.
So, for example, dropships and jump ships early on said, okay, so there are only 2,000 jump ships in the entire inner sphere. And then Mercenaries Handbook 3055 said, all right, now there are 3,000 jump ships in the entire inner sphere. And then, Interstellar Operations comes along and says, oh, yeah, actually, Comstar was doing this insurance registry type thing, and they had 3,000 registries in 3055, but there are actually at least an order of magnitude more jump ships out there than that. Most people just didn't bother signing up for Comstar insurance. And so that's how they get around.
Yeah. Hard numbers kill the universe. Like, there's always consequences. No matter how exact you think the number is, it's gonna break something. Any number.
Yeah.
Do you guys, so John, this might be pertaining to you, but if any of you guys have worked on it, then you can feel free to chime in. Do you guys consult on the Harebrained Schemes Battletech game? Because Comstar not kicking in the airlock when you got the Argo was immersion breaking.
I was not consulted on that game at all, so alas.
I thought that you might have done some like fiction or something for Harebrained Schemes at one point, or we did, so I figured that you'd be the best the voice of reason on that one. But
I have with them in the past, but on this one they did it. I mean, you got Jordan there, so I think the matter expert there. It would have been I wouldn't have minded, but didn't get the call on that one. So
I think our main input was fact-checking the House Arano source book.
Yeah, there you go. Which was an interesting crossover for us to do that with them. Like, okay, fun as far as I know, and I believe now that is official because we published it. So the Arano thing is out there, so to speak. My claim to fame on the BattleTech game is I work with the narrator who does the bad guy. I can't remember his name, but he's our voice of BattleTech on our audiobooks. So at least the current one, but we're bringing on more. So yeah.
So how often do you still refer to non-PDF sources when fact-checking? I know Sarn is thrown out there a lot, and technically it's not a PDF source, but are there others?
Are you talking PDF versus hard copy, or just?
The question doesn't specify. It just says, do you still refer to non-PDF sources when fact-checking?
I've digitized most of my collection here, so...
I was about to say, I can't see why when, like you said, the search, especially now that it's a whole body search, basically makes it so much easier. Yeah.
Yeah. I have to pay $3 a pound if I go over my weight allowance when I move overseas, so everything went digital.
Yep.
Although I did think for the video games, I wanted to basically look into their stories. So I actually sat down and watched through all of the Let's Play runs through MechWarrior 2, 3, 4, etc., and transcribed them. And so those transcripts are up on Sarn. And so I can refer back to those if there are plot points relevant to gameplay storylines.
Right.
It's not canon, but it's, you can look at it and say, hey, maybe this fits in, maybe we could bring this in, sort of thing.
So this was a question I asked when we were alluding to some of the crazy canon questions. So keep that in mind, because I've been taking the questions in order. As you just alluded to, in answering the crazy canon question, you all are also writers. How do you keep up your motivation for fact-checking? What do you like most about it?
I like it because I get to see all the cool stuff the other writers are picking out, before everybody else.
That's a solid answer.
If anyone's ever seen the YouTube show, what is it? Actually, their opening line is, "There's one thing nerds like more than anything else, and it's saying somebody else is wrong."
Yeah, I'm surprised we haven't gotten more questions like asking us for the answers to these really difficult questions in obscure parts of the universe. And of course, now that I'm saying that, there's going to be dozens of them.
Don't open that door, buddy. We've kind of... the reason is I think the fan base has been kind of instructed not to do that because we try to keep it focused on what the topic is.
A lot of our...
Yeah, go ahead, Luke.
A lot of our job isn't knowing the answers per se, but knowing where to find the answers.
Right.
That's a big difference.
Now, I have a question for you, which I think I know what the answer is going to be, but I want to hear it. As you're fact-checking and going through something, and since you're writers, do you find that articles or stories you're fact-checking give you plot points or spin-off ideas or inspire you to put something, I want to make a note of that to write about it later?
Yeah, absolutely. I've got this little document going with little plot points I want to touch up on. And Luke brought up the Quasar Empire, so now I got to talk with him about that because I'm totally interested in seeing what you've got in mind there.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Mainly to jump on mistakes other people have made and try and write something that does it better. Like you were saying before about the aerospace flights coming into planets and things. No one covers it, so I want to make an effort to put it in.
Right. Eric?
Yeah, I mean in terms of aerospace flights, aerospace battles and stuff like that, I try to make sure that we have everything covered in the stuff that I've worked on. What I like to do is I try to find the often weirder or lighter-hearted elements of the BattleTech universe. So, for example, when I wrote a thing from Shrapnel, I made an allusion to the Great Urban Mech Uprising of 3122. So, eventually, there might be a story about that.
Nice.
But other people come up with other interesting things. I'm like, hey, that's a nice hook. I think I could come up with a story based off, that expands on that hook. And so, I'm one of the co-authors of Tomorrow Rising, and there were a lot of great hooks in Shattered Fortress. And I'm just like, okay, where can we take this? And how can we expand this going this forward? And so that was a lot of fun. So
Cool.
kudos to Shattered Fortress.
I think that was 90% Phil. So good for him. We'll give him a shout out. Phil Lee. Guy who does a lot of our lifting on source book material and creation.
So next question is, since I know you guys go through a lot of the PDFs, as we said before, from 2 different questions that you do a lot of the PDF, mass search, see where you can find the reference to. Do you guys go through the BattleCorps fiction when you fact check?
Yep.
Yeah. There's one, the BattleCorps fiction, that's all canon, except for the Iron Rider stuff, which is unfortunate because there's some really cool stuff in the Iron Rider series. That was basically a challenge where they said, okay, at Gen Con, you guys have 1 hour to write on this one theme, and you have to have this one element in it.
Oh, yeah.
It wasn't fact checked. And some of them were, it has to end with the word "thank monkey." But despite those constraints, there were some cool stories in there. And I wish to God that Darkness, I think, by Randall was.
I saw that coming. Yeah. We saw that in that last Wolverine entry you wrote, huh?
Yeah.
I'll have to look into that. So, can do a side something with that one, maybe. Yeah, I remember that. We should actually reconstitute those. I think it'd be a lot of fun. Make those writers suffer. Have a lot of fun at Gen Con.
Apparently not enough to come back this year.
All right, what's up next, Town?
We got, what is the product that gave you the most problems?
I don't really want to answer this. No, seriously, because it kind of would make the author of said product, or the authors plural, seem like they didn't do their job. So I don't really think I want to answer this.
I find that completely fair. I mean, the question can be asked, but you guys don't have to answer it if you don't want to or can't. So I'm not expecting you guys to.
I will say, and I'm not going to lay fault at anyone. It was a Herculean task to do, and the behind the scenes is so much more. I will say that it had not so much problems as issues. It was Hour of the Wolf, and again, I'm not laying blame at anyone. Just because of the scope of that book to create and wrap up what it had to wrap up. And I understand, I've said this before on AMAs, that book is not all things to all people, and it's not going to be. But just getting it over the finish line was one of the most Herculean tasks that I've ever had to do in my tenure at the company. And I'm very pleased with the final product. I know, like I said, it's not everyone's cup of tea, but for what it had to do and the things it had to accomplish, I think it did it certainly well enough, if not, more than adequately over the bar. But getting it there was a very, very, very big lift. So there you go. That's just my 2 cents. So otherwise, if no one else has anything on that one, we can keep moving.
Yeah,
Leave that one.
Okay.
Okay, so do you build a relationship with certain writers? I was going to say authors, writers, knowing what parts of the universe you can usually trust them to be good on, and what areas they usually need help with?
I'd say some, but just because I'm social and I enjoy talking to people. But not through fact checking itself, just on my own personal time. I'll be like, hey, how's it going?
That's an interesting question, but actually I would almost recommend that the fact checkers not be standoffish, but certain compartmentalize the fact checking work versus interacting with the writers, because there could be bleed over from one to the other, and I don't think anyone really wants that. So yeah, but you guys' relationships are yours on your own time, et cetera, too. I'm not gonna put the banhammer down on that because it'd be very unfair. So
all right, so this one's gonna be a little bit far reach, but this is gonna be in maybe in your history of fact checking and your gut feeling. And I thought it was just funny enough to leave in here. Is there a logistical reason why humanity has not spread or grown the inner sphere?
What, 8,000 worlds isn't enough for you people? Good God!
Well, not that it hasn't grown the inner sphere, because you look at the various fiction and there are innumerable, out in the deep periphery, there are lots and lots of isolated colonies and the rest of that. So people have continued to expand. And the Interstellar Expedition sourcebook did a great job of showing that, there are, colonies way out even beyond the nebulas. Then, of course, you get, Herb's Nebula California going on out there. But in terms of the inner sphere stuff, the description has always been that essentially the inner sphere powers got out to a certain point and they just sort of culturally ran out of steam. They were focusing all of their efforts on battling their neighbors in the inner sphere and didn't have any resources to allocate out to colonization. So it was considered unusual that the Tarian Concordat had this far-looker group that was then advocating lots more colonization. So after that plot point got introduced, the Tarian Concordat map expanded, and then somebody decided they hated the Tarian Concordat, and they basically got shattered. So maybe that shows what happens when you try to colonize instead of fight your neighbors. You only do one thing well.
Object lesson. I just think it's a matter of, and again, we're not putting hard numbers on it, but it's a matter of limited resources. And especially if you're trying to prosecute a war against one or more neighbors, you can only do so much. Even with 100 or 500 worlds and billions of people, there's always only so much to go around. So, and diminishing returns. But that's my opinion. It's not based on any kind of factual information.
Plus, convincing your citizens, hey, leave your established colonies and go off to pirate-hunted wilderness.
Yeah.
Give you a flag.
I feel like that doesn't go over very well with some of them.
It is worth saying that by the Dark Age there have been some resettlement efforts, and the Inner Sphere has so many dead worlds now that it's very easy to just pick one of those on the map and say, all right, well, let's recolonize that planet from a narrative perspective. I mean, from an in-universe perspective, it also kind of makes sense because the planet is going to be within the confines of your existing stellar nation. It's going to be easier to support, to basically protect from said marauders and pirates that were just brought up. So planets like Kerensky's vision kind of come into play there and show that there's still a willingness to expand, even if it's not out towards the periphery.
But at the same time, I think Randall's Fall from Glory illustrated the hardships and difficulties of doing that whole big, 2-year jump out into the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
And just supply lines. That's a very good point. You want to be protected and not have to fall prey to marauders, et cetera, or if you get cut off and you're suddenly like, oh, now we're on our own and we're stuck here, and these start to stagnate instead of grow. Yeah, exactly. There's plenty of real world, I'll put that in quotes, real world reasons as to not why the borders only have gone so far.
So this one should be a fun one. Is how do you decide what color lasers are?
I actually tried to canonize this, and I was told that it's not a thing. I'm going to go on record as saying that, for reals. I thought I had the list of what they should be, and it turns out that wasn't the case. Like, okay. And we just had a cover from the Germans. We just had book 2 of Randall's trilogy. We just had the cover art come out. And, of course, if you go look at the German cover, the lasers are yellow. Which we don't do and have never done. And we actually had an internal conversation about, are we going to keep it this way? It's like, well, we're not homaging it. I mean, we are homaging it. It was an homage. We're like, let's make it what it's supposed to be. So we changed it to the typical color for the mediums, which is green.
I mean, if you want to talk about yellow lasers, look at Luke's backdrop right there.
I know. I was going to point out his backdrop. Just
hey!
Lasers, yellow lasers, blue lasers.
Yeah, so it depends. I mean, we do have the 3 primaries, and that's pretty much it. But like I said, I did a couple years. I have a little note. I have a sticky pad on my computer right now that is what I thought they were, and apparently that's not the case. So I'm like, okay. So as a author and editor, I would like to have those actually made set, because it just would be easier in my mind to have this is this class is this class is this class is this. But we're not there yet. So I guess I'll keep fighting that lonely battle myself.
What is each person's favorite mech?
Fireball for me. I've loved playing characters that have obsessions with speed, and the Fireball, meets that need, especially that fantastic XTRO version that had both the XXL engine and the supercharger. So basically, it crosses your kitchen floor in about one turn.
I'll start with the rest of the team before I answer.
I'll follow up after Eric. I know I'm the disembodied voice, but just like him, I like speed, but I also like being squishy, so I enjoy very much playing the Locust. In any variation. It's just too
funny.
stupid of a mech that it somehow lives on board.
I thought you'd say the Irby then. So, geez. So, Eddie or Luke, what are your thoughts on that one?
I'm going to go with Executioner. Playing Ghost Bear, you have to learn how to drive that damn thing.
Eddie, what about you?
I don't think I can go just one. I'll do weight classes. For a light, I'll say the Locust, 100%. Medium, probably the Wolverine. Heavy, that's going to be the Orion. And assault, I've got no freaking idea, so pass.
I'm going to go with the Venerable Battlemaster simply because that was my very first mech that I ever got and owned. And I've always had a soft spot for that one. So I just can't go wrong. Plus, I like the idea of the whole gunslinger where it's actually holding its gun. That is, I think it's hilarious to me, but also really cool at the same time. So there you go. All right.
How much of books like TRO 3075 that bring in units that have been mentioned but never got stats come from the fact-checking team? Not quite sure what.
I'm sorry. Repeat that question again.
How much of books like TRO 3075 that bring in units that have been mentioned but never got stats come from the fact-checking team? I think they're asking, those mechs that never had stats, how many of those stats get created by the fact-checking team? That's how I read it.
That sounds about right. Is that a thing? I didn't think it was even a thing per se.
I think that's more a TRO dev thing.
Yeah,
I know
like
Johannes
Ray
is like
and
100% on top of this right now. Yeah.
Fact checkers don't do stats. They come from the author. Usually.
That's a Ray question. So there you go.
I mean, if we had the ability to do that, there'd definitely be stats from that Goliath out of the box BattleCorps story that has a Mackie outrunning a hover tank. This is described as a terrible hover tank, but man, it must be bad. Being outrun by a Mackie.
So a hover tank being pushed by a couple of guys.
Exactly.
What was your favorite story to fact check that has been published?
Jeez. Considering how much you guys have done over the years, that's a very broad question.
I mean, I'm a newcomer and I can't even answer this question.
There had to be one that stood out above the others for whatever reason.
Well, honestly, it's I don't know if it's the one that basically was the intro to MechWarrior 5 that Randall wrote. Because I was going through that, just reading it for my own enjoyment when it came out, because that was the official tie-in fiction, but it hadn't come by us for fact check. And I was going through it just to add it to my master list of fiction, and I'm just going through this. This is a lot of really good, deep connections. I'm not seeing any major errors. It's got a lot. It delves into a lot of the lore that was just mentioned in passing in the early books. So I thought it was a great tie-in bit that really fit the setting and expanded a lot of things from a time when a lot of that stuff had been glossed over. And I'm thinking, this is great. I'm being told that this is not official, but I'm seeing that this is meshing seamlessly. So that was a joy to read.
Any others?
I'm going to go ahead and plug Tamar Rising. I think every single person who worked on that book did a fantastic job. It is excellent. I cannot wait to see it be published. I think everyone's going to love it. It is a solid 10 out of 10. No joke.
Luke, anything to add to that?
No, I've got to say Tamar is brilliant. You're going to have to look forward to that one. But generally you remember the bad ones rather than, or at least for me, I remember the bad ones rather than the good ones. So,
Fair. not a fact checking, but just for a different approach to a story. One of the things I've really enjoyed, and I've liked all the things for various reasons over the years, but one of the things I really enjoyed that sticks out in my mind was Craig Reed's Icons of War, the short novel that he wrote back set in the homeworlds and everything about the taking. I won't spoil it for those who haven't read it yet. Just because it was a very different take on the clans and one we didn't see very often. And I really liked his approach to it. I thought he did a really good job in bringing that to life. And it was really, really enjoyable for me to see that, because that's the kind of viewpoints I'm looking for in a lot of the fiction, is take something that, you think you know this, but hey, it turns out it's actually more like that. And yeah, it was just very enjoyable for me to work on and see come together.
And many of his concepts from that book actually play key roles in Tomorrow Rising.
Huh. Okay. Interesting. So, next time.
Read and find out.
This is actually the last question that I have. And what is your coolest story you're fact checking right now? And I'm going to append to that you can talk about.
Well, I already hinted at the one that's currently in fact check, which I'm really interested in seeing the comments and B when it comes out too, because it's telling the real story behind an event that was told one way in public, and they're telling the real story of it. So I'm just going to leave that one alone. But I don't know if you guys have anything else you want to talk about per se.
Well, Hunting Grounds has been announced, and that's going to be a really solid novel when it comes out. So maybe that one.
There you go. Okay. Yep.
Yeah.
Working on getting that one over the finish line.
NDAs all around, huh? You can't sneak it by me.
That is true. But Eddie makes a good point. The hunting season has been announced. It's coming out. So,
sorry.
Yeah. Ground season. Tomato. You don't proof the title.
I think the ongoing Aerodani Light Horse series has also been good to work on.
Yeah. That is, by the way, the story I'm referring to obliquely is the next one in that series, which I'm very pleased with. So yeah, that's a lot of fun.
Red Baron says, just say everything I'm working on is great and smile.
Exactly. Big smile.
And with that, guys, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the Battletech Fact Checkers AMA here. Some of these guys are up super late because they are across the world from us. I think Eric, is the one who's up at like 4 or 5 a.m. to do this with us. So I want to make sure that he can get to bed here. So thank you guys so much for joining in on the AMA. These guys are awesome, and they put a lot of work into making sure Battletech continues to run behind the scenes and keeping those smaller gears, moving when the rest of us only can look at the big gears. So make sure to hit that bell icon, follow everything around, Twitter, Facebook, and you'll get more posts about new AMAs that Ray and I are setting up here in the future. So hopefully we can maybe go around to doing some of the older AMAs and coming back to them for those of you who missed it, for like the writers and authors and maybe the main team maybe coming back on to talk about other things as well. So thank you guys so much, and we will see you next month. Ray might still be here, and he'll maybe announce now what the next AMA might be if he's already got it planned. So thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.
Farewell.
All right.
All right.